portraying Roger Williams. John is a true Rhode Islander, born in Rhode Island. He attended Rhode Island College, majoring in history with a minor in anthropology. He attended Bingham University for a master's in anthropology, focusing on archaeology, with an additional studies at Cambridge University in England. For 27 years, John was a park ranger at Roger Williams National Memorial Park in Providence. John has over 50 years of experience as a historical reenactor, black powder weapons, and stage combat. He has helped produce a series of Rhode Island Shakespeare productions in downtown Providence and the downtown Sundown Folk Festivals. Helped produce the Providence Folk Festival, now the Rhode Island Folk Festival. John has been an instructor and main stage actor at King Richard's Fair, has appeared in several movies, done voiceover work, and engaged the public at hundreds of historical events throughout New England. John McNiff is not only a very accomplished professional actor, but also a very astute historian. Now for our program. Welcome to our quest for America's freedoms. Today is a day like all days, only you are there. The year is 1680, and you are about to meet Roger Williams, founder of this settlement named Colony of Rhode Island. As you will witness, Roger Williams is a passionate advocate for religious freedom and the separation of church and state. Please welcome Roger Williams.
Pleasure. Good morrow, my friends and loving neighbors. Well, Oscar Wikwasin, as our Narragansett friends would say.
I'm always at a loss to how to refer to you, Minister Williams or Roger Williams?
Well, let's make it Elder Williams. Words sometimes have more than one meaning, if you get my drift with the
All right. Elder Williams, you were born in 1603.
That's what they tell me.
That's what they say. You have lived an extraordinary life with all your challenges and adventures, and you're in remarkably good health.
It has been interesting, let's put it that way.
Some of your challenges, is a quick...
Well, I grew up in a world where everyone spied on everyone else. My hometown was London. I was born in the Smithfield section of London in a place called Cow Lane. My mother was an innkeeper. My father was a merchant tailor. This is the person that makes the bespoke suits for the people at Parliament and at court. Through those connections, I met my mentor, if you would, Sir Edward Coke, Chief Justice of all England. And for him, I would go around because I taught myself a special way of writing called shorthand, where I could take down as fast as people speak and write it down. So I could go to Parliament when Sir Edward Coke was not there and take down the speeches that were being made. I could go to court and see what people were doing and take down notes from what people were saying, and I could meander the corridors and listen to conversations and take down notes of what people were saying. So Edward sent me to Charterhouse School, where I learned Latin, Greek, Hebrew, mathematics, rhetoric, and of course basic grammar and all of that. And from there I went up to Cambridge University, Pembroke College. Now, during all of this, you have to understand the world that we're in. For in my grandparents' years, there was this great king in England called Henry VIII. You've heard of him, yes? Most remember him as having 6 wives, with divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, yes. But he was a great defender of the faith. He received an award from the Pope in Rome for defending the Roman Catholic Church. This is a fantastic level of prominence in the world at that time. But then he wanted a divorce from his wife Catherine, daughter of the King of Spain. The Pope almost granted this divorce, but there's a small political problem in the way. See, the Pope was the nephew of the King of Spain. He did not want, the King of Spain did not want his daughter and her children to be left out in the wind. So the Pope refused the divorce. And Henry, being the kind of person he was, decided that he would divorce England from the Roman Catholic Church and start his own, the Church of England. Guess who he put at the top of that church? Himself. Because that's the kind of person he was. And you must also understand, this is a world where the great chain of being was prominent. There's God and the angels up at the top. And then the kings and the emperors, and then the clergy and the nobility, and then the upper classes, middle classes, lower classes, and it goes all the way down until the muck and mire at the bottom, where everything has its place. The king is God's appointed on this earth. So everyone in England, when Henry received the award from the Pope in Rome, had to be Roman Catholic. When Henry split with the Roman Catholic Church and forged the Church of England, everyone in England must now be a member of the Church of England. He seized the monasteries. He seized the church's lands. He took their money and distributed it among his friends so that they would support him even more. Well, Henry eventually passed on. And Henry's daughter from his first marriage with Catherine, Mary, no, she did not become queen. He had a son, Edward, who became king. Now, Edward was only king for a short period of time, but he had some disputes with the things in place in the Church of England and tried to change things. And so everyone in England now must look around and see what they have to change. But when Edward died, he was only on the throne for a short time. When Edward died, Henry's daughter, eldest daughter, Mary, became queen. She is the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who was the daughter, basically, of the King of Spain, niece to the Pope in Rome, which means all of England must now go back to the Catholic Church, whether you liked it or not. Mary was adamant in people going back to the Catholic Church. And if you disagreed with her, you were punished. There were fines, there were imprisonments, and there were martyrdoms. So many people suffered martyrdom that she earned herself a nickname. Does anyone know what that was? Bloody Mary. Luckily for England, she did not survive long on the throne. And her younger sister, Elizabeth, became queen. Now, Elizabeth wanted to be seen as a strong and independent woman, just like her father. So she hearkened everyone in England back to the Church of England. And for England's sake, Elizabeth was on the throne for more than 50 years. But to maintain that appearance of being a strong and independent woman, she never married. And the problem with that is no heirs to the throne. Now this is a real problem. Henry's father, became king at the end of a 30-year period of civil war. And it's still on people's minds that they must have an heir to the throne. And with Elizabeth getting older and older, people were worried that might fall back into another period of civil war. Well, there were people that could be heirs to the throne. And there was one in particular, James the Sixth of Scotland. He was King of Scotland. He was nephew to Elizabeth, through Mary, Queen of Scots, who was You see, every time the monarch changed, the people in the country had to change churches and how they worshipped God. James started making agreements with all the different religious groups in England, the Catholics, the Church of England, other groups of Protestants, the Familists, the Quakers, which is a brand new group, all of these different groups. There was another group called the Puritans who wanted to purify the entire church and break it down to its simplest basic elements. He made agreements with all of these groups that if they supported him to be the next king, he would not persecute them. He got their support. Obviously, they had not dealt with nobility very much. James did become the next king, about the year that I was born, 1603, and proceeded to break each and every one of those agreements, including, he went and had the Bible rewritten, which we saw as a blasphemy. For most of us who are common folk, if you would, used the Geneva Bible, which had marginal notes to tell you what the context of the words were. A perfect example is Romans 13, where it says, the ruler is there by God's will, and you may not stand against him. The Geneva Bible, the marginal notes make sure that you understand that the ruler must be a good ruler, and if he is a tyrant, you are obliged to stand against him. Well, the king took those things right out. This is the king that I grew up with. This is the king I was making notes on. This is the king that my mentor, Sir Edward Coke, tried to put in his place, because he came down from Scotland with these grand ideas of how to run England without Parliament, or without Parliament's permission. Sir Edward Coke harkened back to the Magna Carta, saying that everyone, including the king, is subject to the law. This upset the king. Picture sitting at court, or standing at court, the way most people would. Sir Edward Coke came in with a petition of right, telling the king that he had limits to his powers. The king is sitting in his throne, and he is so annoyed with Sir Edward that he stands up and stamps his foot. This is bad. Sir Edward Coke was thrown into the tower. This is all happening when I am up at Cambridge, studying theology, learning about God, because I saw, from growing up, through all of this turmoil, and then at Cambridge, I saw, as they say, how the sausage was made. The kings, the princes, the nobles, the cardinals were using religion as a political weapon. It didn't matter what the religion was. As long as they could force the rest of the people to do what they said, they could control them. It had nothing to do with your conscience or your conscience or your conscience. It was a political matter, and people would make religious compromises on a second as long as it was politically expedient. That's the world that I grew up in, sir. And we had to leave that, and many people did. And they came to this New England zone.
What was the unique experience you had at Cambridge with your fellow students?
Well, Cambridge has always been a place of plotting and conspiracy, where people are always looking over their shoulder. I know you have had that. Cambridge is a place where you cannot trust that anything you say in public won't be used against you in the future. They are radicals, but there are radicals on all sides there. And you must be careful of who you talk to. From Cambridge, I went out and became a minister in a small estate out in Essex. And from there, I knew that my hours were numbered in this country, so I must leave. And I joined this grand exodus of Puritans that were leaving England to come to this new England.
So you brought your wife Mary, it was around 1630?
1630, yes, we did come to the Massachusetts Bay. I was invited to come. They were my friends. Winthrop and Cotton and all these people, they were my friends back in England. We'd gone to conferences about Puritan beliefs and the basis of what we were doing and why we're doing what we're doing. And so I came to where they had settled in the Massachusetts Bay in a place called Boston. And I realized immediately that they were making religious compromise for political reasons again. They had taken the trip across the entire ocean to this new world with a charter from the king. And so they did not upset the king. They did not break from the Church of England. They did have their own congregation services here. But if they went back to England, they attended Church of England services there. They did not break. All that trouble, all that work, getting across the ocean, 2 months travel time. Where were you 2 months ago? Picture spending all that time in a place about the size of this room, with stored food in wooden barrels going rotten halfway across, with the water turning bad halfway across, wearing the same clothes for all 2 months. Has anyone here been seasick? Most of these people on these boats had never been to sea. Seasick, closed quarters, rotten food, cold like you've never seen. That's what it's like coming across here. So when I came to Boston, they offered me the position of minister, and I refused them. I went up to Salem, who was a little bit more liberal in their mind ways. Boston put pressure on the people of Salem to, they said, here's a piece of land that you wanted to buy from us. If you get rid of Roger Williams, we'll give you the piece of land. So the people of Salem had to figure out, do they want land or Roger? Land or Roger? Buy Roger. So I went down to the only other English settlement within reach was Plymouth. Now these were not Puritans, truly. These were separatists. They wanted to break entire from the Church of England and have their congregation elect their leadership. I became a minister there, a teacher and a minister there. And one of the things that I started preaching there was that a minister should not be paid. That made him a mercenary. If you're doing it for the money, no. So I needed a job. I am not a hunter, I am not a fisherman, I am not a farmer. I am a city boy from London. What I know is trade. So I took English goods, knives, kettles, hose, axes, blankets, coats, and I went out among the native peoples round about us and did trade these English goods to them for the things that they had of value. Food, furs, things that the English would pay dear for. And I also took with me a trick that my father taught me on the docks of London. When a boat came in from Italy into London, and it had silks from the Far East, if you can speak to the men on the boat before they unload it, you can make a side deal before the silks go to the cloth market. If you've ever been down to the docks where fishermen come in, what have you got? I'll pay you this for it. Talk to the crewman, you don't talk to the captain. And you make the deal because you can speak to them, yes? And you could do that to the Dutch, to the French with their linens, the Italians with their silks coming from the Far East. All of these things are coming into the docks in London. Well, I took the same lesson. And I went out among the Wampanoag and the Narragansett, and I learned their language. And I learned the way they live here. And I learned that this was all their land. They are the true owners of this land. So when I came back to Plymouth, I told the authorities there that they cannot just have this land because they planted an English flag. They must negotiate with the true owners of this land if they wish to live here. They can't have it just because the king said so. The king does not own the land. Well, that got people upset there. That with the minister needing to be paid, and they asked me to leave. There was also an incident with somebody else where we saw the English flag on the flagpole. Now, the English flag is a nice, great white flag with the red cross in the middle of it. The award from the Pope as King Henry, defender of the faith, got the red cross in the middle of the flag. So another fellow and I climbed up the flagpole and cut the red cross out.
The years 1635, 1636 were very, very traumatic for you and your family.
Yes.
One might say almost a time of divine providence.
At the end it was God's providence to me.
Yes.
But 35 and 36, I'm in Salem now, having left Plymouth. And in Salem, I am preaching basic facts. That this land, the true owners of this land are the native peoples, and if you wish to live here, you must negotiate with them. That a minister should not be paid. And then, this is where I went too far. I said, the magistrates may control what you do, but not what you think or what you believe. They can control the second table of the Ten Commandments. The first table are in between you and your Creator. If you break those rules, you're the one that suffers. The second table of the Ten Commandments is for social order. Well, the authorities did not like this at all. In October of 1635, they did arrest me. And they did drag me into prison in Boston. And they did charge me with having new and dangerous opinions. This was my crime. New and dangerous opinions. Now, these were my friends. So they told me to just shut up. They didn't care what I thought as long as I didn't preach it. I refused because this truth was too important. This truth was basic for everyone. This place that they had traveled 2 months to get to across the ocean, this new place could have been a blank slate where you don't recreate all the crimes, all the persecution, all the bloodshed in the old world. Here, we could start something new. And all they did was bring their baggage over from the old world and start it anew. So I refused to just be quiet. So they sentenced me to exile. But during the process of defending myself, I fell ill. So they allowed me to stay in town, in Salem town, until I had recovered, as long as I did not preach those dangerous opinions at church. Well, this parole I did take, and I did not teach those dangerous opinions in church. We discussed them at the kitchen table after Sunday services. Pretty soon my house was more crowded than the churches were. End of January of 1636, they did send soldiers to arrest me and put me on the next ship back to England. This was January of 1636. This was cold. You have to understand, in England, it just doesn't get cold. In Cambridge, there are palm trees. There was a period of really cold winters for a short time where the Thames froze over and there were festivals and ice skating, but this was extraordinary. Normally, we get a light dusting of snow and it is gone by the evening. This was hip-deep snow with drifts going up to the tops of the trees. This was so cold that the Narragansett Bay had frozen over. And into this wilderness, I did escape. For I heard that they were coming to arrest me and put me on the next boat back to England. I had a short period of time and I escaped into this wilderness and there froze to death before some native peoples did find me and take me in and give me shelter for that winter. I must tell you this. When I went back to England in 1642, I spent a good amount of time with a friend of mine who was a poet of some sort. So you might have heard of him, John Milton. Well, I related these stories to him, and he did write something. It's a great tome, but there's a small portion in it. Can I read it to you? I keep it with me because it's so touching. This is, mind you, could be my words, but it's not. But this is where Lucifer has been thrown into hell. Is this the region, the soil, the clime, said the lost archangel? This the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who is now sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best. Whom reason hath equalled, force hath made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world. And thou profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor. One who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same? And what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater, here at least we shall be free. Almighty hath not built here for his envy, no, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. We started a place that I said was God's providence to me in my distress, to being tossed from one place to the other by my friends, being tossed into a howling wilderness by my friends. I was taken in by the native peoples of this place, who are my new friends. And I negotiated for a piece of land with great rivers, freshwater spring, perfect place to settle, on their major north-south road. And I did call this place Providence. It was God's providence to me in my distress. I made agreements with all the natives and sachems round about us to make sure that this was all right with all of them.
Is it true you have better relationships with the Indians than fellow colonists?
I saw the native peoples round us for what they were. They were people. I have some English friends. I still have English friends, both here and back in England. But I must say that Canonicus, chief sachem of the Narragansetts, I looked at him like a father. He was an elder statesman who knew what politics was. He knew how to negotiate, how to talk to people. His son, Miantinomi, was a little bit brash, but he was a good man. But all of the native peoples, there are some that laugh easily, some that are jokers, some that play practical jokes on you. There's some that are sour, like, take a poll in this room. You'll have all personalities. I know, more than once, some native peoples did get a great canoe and take me down to Kokomskasik. And I'd have a pile of books in front of me in their canoe. Now, being a good Englishman, I do not swim. And they swim like fish. So as we're going down in this canoe, we're not too far from the shore. They said, "Oh, Roger, we're getting into rough weather," and they start shaking the canoe back and forth. And then they see my panic at this. They did laugh and laugh and laugh. I had friends from everywhere. And I had people that did not like me.
It's rather ironic that 1637, just 2 years after you were exiled from Ceylon, almost on the verge of being sent to prison in England, but the colonies asked you to intercede on their behalf with the Indians, and actually asked you to ask the Indians to support them in their war against another Indian tribe, and you succeeded.
Well, the Pequots.
Pequot, yes.
I did try to go there and to negotiate with them.
Yeah.
And as I go into their camp, you know when you've been starving and you see a good meal? You know the way that you look at that meal? That's the way they were looking at me. I could not say that I made friends with any of the Pequot, for they were adamant that the English were going to steal everything they had, and that they had to stop the English now. Now, was that their own idea? Was that an idea given to them by the Dutch just down at New Amsterdam? It was also giving them arms and powder and shot? I don't know. But there was always a competition between the Narragansett and the Pequot, and the Mohican and the Pequot. And when I knew that I could not negotiate with the Pequot, I negotiated with the Narragansett and the Mohican, and did try to keep as much peace as possible. It did not work. The Narragansett gave me ideas for the English on how these Pequot should be dealt with, and I did pass along that information. I was the middleman. The Narragansett those were my friends I knew. If you don't get along with my friends,
Yes. What do you believe caused the King Philip Indian Wars
Ooh.
in 1675?
Jumping a bit, aren't we?
76. The death of John Sossaman,
Yeah.
the Harvard-educated Indian,
Yeah.
etc.
Can I put in one thing before we jump to that?
Yes, please.
We set up Providence a way like nowhere else had been set up. We didn't have a document from the king originally that said, you must have a government that looks like this, and we're going to give you a governor, and all these other rules and regulations. We came together and put our own document together based on what we, as exiles from all these other English settlements, wanted. And we decided that the form of government we should have would be a democracy, where each head of household would vote on what was going to happen in the town. And the majority of the vote would decide what would happen, but only in civil things. For we did not. Our founding document, this patent that we pulled together for ourselves, did not start off the way the Mayflower Compact did, with in the name of God, amen. Or the way the Massachusetts Bay Charter, so-and-so, by the grace of God, King, is going to give you permission. We said, we, the undersigned, are going to put this government together where the heads of households get to vote. And the majority of that vote decides what's going to happen, but only in civil things. We were going to have a hedge or a wall of separation between the church, the garden of the church, and the wild world of the state. You have all seen what governments act like, yes? Whether your own or someone else's government. Have you ever in your lives seen any government anywhere without corruption? Thank you. Do you want your faith tied to that? How does government work when it works best? They make compromises, yes? I have no idea what any of you believe, but for political expediency, for more cash in your pocket, are you going to compromise your beliefs that you hold in your heart and your soul? But governments will. The only way to cure that sickness is to have that hedge or wall of separation between the two. And then the government deals with this world, and your faith deals with the next. This was the founding core piece of Rhode Island. This was the most important part. We had people coming here from Portugal, from Brazil, because we did not persecute Jewish people. We had Quakers here. In Boston, they were hanged. The oldest Quaker meeting house is down to Newport. We have the very first Baptist church in America was gathered by myself and others in Providence. Elsewhere, they're arrested and punished. We have people that have no religion. Anywhere else, they would be prosecuted and hounded out of the settlements. As long as you were a peaceful, working member of the society, you were welcome here. That's what made us different. That's what gave us strength. That's why we came here. To start something brand new. This blank slate had new writing on it now. No one gets punished for what they believe. Now, King Philip's War. Over the years, Plymouth got greedy. Plymouth would not have existed without Osamequin, the sachem of the Wampanoag. When they landed there, those 100 people got off the Mayflower, and by spring, 50 people were left. And Osamequin took them under his wing. They were protected. Anyone have children? The children grateful to everything that you've given them? Now think, the children of the people that came to Plymouth felt that it was their land that they had grown up on and started making demands on the Wampanoag people. Well, this is our land now, we grew up here, forgetting that the Wampanoag had grown up here for time immemorial. They started having disputes. You killed a couple of our cattle. Your cattle raided our cornfields. But you killed our cattle, so now you must pay. Well, we don't have any money. We'll pay in land then. You have plenty of land. You can pay in land. You killed some of our pigs, the English say. Your pigs were raiding our storehouses where we keep our food, so we don't starve. Well, you must pay a fine for killing our pigs. We don't have any money. We'll pay in land. And this is going on, and going on, and going on. And John Sassamon, supposedly, now he was an educated man, John Sassamon. He had been to Harvard School. He is a native person that spoke, he's a Massachusetts, I believe, that spoke English, acted as a translator, and had been living in a praying town in Massachusetts. But he was also working with Philip as a translator. There's some of his handwriting that is out there that you can see if you look. But supposedly, John Sassamon took some of Philip's words and brought it back to the governor of Massachusetts Bay and told him that Philip was planning an uprising. Philip was now the new sachem of the Wampanoag people. And the Massachusetts people did not believe this. And Sassamon was back in, I think it was January of 75, and disappeared. When the spring came, they found his body floating underneath the ice in a lake out here. And at first they thought he had just drowned. And then a couple of Indians from a praying town came forward and said no, they had seen 3 of the other native peoples hit him on the head and stuff him under the ice for betraying Philip. 3 of Philip's men, I believe they said. And so the English arrested Philip's men and put them on trial at Plymouth. And put some native peoples on the jury as well. But now think about this. At this time, the English were supposed to run English affairs and the native peoples were supposed to run native affairs. If anybody were to persecute or prosecute those 3 people that committed the murder, it should have been the Native Americans themselves. The English had no right to interfere. It was a Native American versus a Native American. There's no English jurisdiction. But Plymouth stuck its head in the middle. And they convicted the 3 natives of killing John Sassamon. Some magic that they had going on in court there was nonsense, but this killing, and then the hanging of the 3 others, when they had no jurisdiction over them, pretty much set things in motion for King Philip's War to begin. The actual incidents were much less dramatic, if you would. The people out in Swansea, I think it was a Sabbath, or that, or they were having a Thanksgiving where they would go to church and pray all day. And a couple of people were left behind at their households doing odd jobs and such. And a group of young teenage, if you would, Wampanoag came up on a woman who was outside and sharpening, and she was doing different clothes, and they took a tomahawk and they said, "Could you sharpen my tomahawk for me?" She said, "I cannot do this, for it is a Sabbath day." So I guess it was the Sabbath. I cannot do work like that on the Sabbath. And so, but she stood up to them and they said, okay, it's tough. They went on their way. And they came to a cow out in the field, not too far from a house. And in that house was a grandfather and a young boy who had just run into the house when they saw the native boys coming. And the natives, because they were hungry, they killed the cow and started cutting it up. The grandfather from the house took his gun and fired out the window, wounded one of the young teenage native boys. And so they did run off. As they were running off, The wounded one was limping. They came upon people coming back from the meeting house. And the people coming back from the meeting house made fun of his limp. Native peoples are very proud peoples. Honor and pride are something that's very important to them. They made fun of him. And they were slaughtered where they stand. That's the beginning of an absolutely horrible conflict because people didn't want to talk to each other. Plymouth got greedy. They wanted more land. And they couldn't just find the Wampanoags away.
Your personal losses at the time?
Okay. These native peoples and the English who died in this war, everyone lost everything. Providence was burned to the ground. Warwick was burned to the ground. Apponaug and East Greenwich places were burned to the ground. Outlying farmhouses. All of the English in Rhode Island, pretty much except for Newport and Portsmouth, was burned to the ground. The ones that were living on the mainland that could fled to Newport. My wife and children did. Left a few of us in Providence. So when this army of 2,000 comes marching up the bay, I did go out and try to negotiate with them. I started by scolding them. And they said, yes, we are in a bad way. And I tried to bluff them. I said, you get 100 of your people, your warriors up here, and I'll get 100 Englishmen, and we can have this out by 100 against 100, and it doesn't have to be wholesale slaughter. They said, talk to us in a month after we've burned Plymouth. So I went back to the basic negotiation. I said, give me your demands. Give me your demands, I'll write them down. We'll get a runner to get this up to Boston. We can have this settled before there's any more bloodshed. It was not to be. And as I turned to walk back to the blockhouse that was there, they did warn me not to go by the street side, but to go down by the water's edge, because there were some of the young ones on my side of the river who might cause me some mischief. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people died, both English and native. In one battle, more than, well, hardly a battle. The attack on the Great Swamp, over 700 men, women, and children were slaughtered. Native Americans in their home, in their fortress in the Great Swamp, isolated, away from everything. Deerfield, out towards Worcester, all of these places. It was horrible.
You lost your home?
Yes. My books,
Your books?
my sermons, my writings, my letters.
Your trading post? I believe.
The trading post down to Cocumscusson. I had sold that to Mr. Updike. But all these places, and my friends. Before the war, there were close to 15,000, maybe 20,000 in Nahigansik. There were only 1,500 English in Rhode Island. We made up a small portion of this place. Oh. It's a sad thing.
I understand with all your losses at this point in your life, and meeting war is just ending just a few years ago, that unfortunately you're financially
I have tried. I made 2 voyages back to England to get the paperwork for this colony. One for a royal patent, or parliamentary patent, and one for the charter from the king. I funded that by selling my trading post, Mr. Updike, and selling other things that I owned so I could go over there for the people of Rhode Island to get this paperwork done. And to come back early when things were getting upset here with Warwick and Samuel Gorton and all that, but John Clark finished the work on getting us the Royal Charter, and he did. He did an amazing bit of work. The Royal Charter of 1663 from Charles II says that in this small place we're going to try a lively experiment to see who can have good government separate from religion. Here, no person can be punished for what they believe. It's extraordinary. Gave us a level of religious freedom unknown anywhere in the New World or the Old. Here, no person can be punished for what they believe. But there's a flip side to this separation of church and state, which I didn't mention before. You see, if the king is not directly connected to God, if he's not God's appointed on this earth, then where does government get its authority from? I wrote in 1644, in the Bloody Tenet, that the foundation of civil power lies in the people, and that they have the right to create a civil government that meets their needs, has as much power as they give it, and lasts as long as they want it to. 1644, I wrote those words. And in the Charter of 1663, the king said that we are going to have a government where the people elect their representatives and elect their governor. This was extraordinary. For governors up until that time had been friends of the king, who were appointed to come over to the colony, stuff their pockets with as much as they could, and then go back to England and live like nobles. Here, in our little place, we got to choose our governor. Out of us, not out of a pool of people out back in England, but out of us, one of us gets to be the governor. And the people that go and meet and make decisions are going to be from us. This is extraordinary. But it also comes with a great responsibility. For you all must defend this. Otherwise, it is but a dream dreamed, a bubble burst.
Elder Whitman, would you be willing to accept questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So who has questions for mine own self? Yes, sir.
Did your attitude towards the Native Americans change much towards the end of your life?
Out of practicality more than my belief in who and what they were, for Rhode Island, the entire colony, had stayed out of this war. We had tried at the very beginning to prevent this war. Massachusetts Bay, the United Colonies, Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, and Connecticut, invaded Rhode Island and did more than stir up a hornet's nest. So at the end of the war, as I had mentioned, there were 15 to 20,000 Narragansett at the beginning of the war. The end of the war, after all was said and done, there were mere 500 left here. Not all killed. Many just up and left. Some were taken into servitude down in the Caribbean. But people that had been my friends were now vicious enemies. And I can't blame them. When I wrote about the burning of Providence, if you ever have read or heard of any of my letters, if I don't like someone, I don't pull punches. When I was speaking of the Pequots, I could see them dip up to their elbows in English blood, is the way that I describe them. When I was refused permission to act as a suitor towards a young lady back in England, I did write to her aunt that your hair is getting grey and that your creator will be calling you back soon. I was young. These people have just burned my town and mine own house. And in describing them, I'm talking about Johnstone Wallmaker, a peaceable fellow. If I was angry with them, if I thought they were unjustified in what they were doing, I could have just as well said Johnstone Wallmaker, the bloodthirsty fellow. They had been pushed to this extreme. And they knew that they had been pushed to this extreme. Many of them didn't want to do this, but there was no choice left behind. Before the fighting started in this war, the Narragansett had signed a treaty with Boston, saying that they would stay neutral out of all of this. They would not join in the fight. Philip has sent his old men, women, and children to go stay with the Narragansett as refugees. Just after the Narragansett had signed this neutrality treaty, and they were coming back, they were stopped on the way and said, oh, one more thing. Turn over those refugees as hostages to us in Boston. As I said, the native peoples are a proud people, but once they give their word, they can't go back on it. They had promised them shelter. And so the answer from the Narragansett was not a Wampanoag, nor the paring of a Wampanoag's nail. They could not turn people that had come to them, old men, women, and children, coming for protection, they could not turn them over to their enemies. The Pawcatuck, you have the Niantic down there, the eastern western Niantic, and then you have the Pequot down there. It varies depending on the season and the year. Well, some years they have a larger territory than the previous year, but as you come up into the north here, you have some of the Nipmuc coming down into this very area. And some say that the Wampanoag came into this very area as well. So the areas north of Providence seem to be more flexible, but definitely from Providence on south down to the Pawcatuck would be Narragansett territory. Does that make sense? And the islands too.
Yeah, so obviously the primo land would be the Providence area.
Not necessarily.
No.
You got to understand, these people were farmers, they were fishermen, they were hunters. So you take a look at what you've got. This is something where you take a look at maps and you can see the coastline. And Narragansett Bay, 420 miles of all inlets and bays. These inlets have quahogs, oysters, lobsters, crabs, all kinds of food. And the flat land near these inlets is very fertile to grow corn, beans, squash. So it's these undulating coastlines that make the best place to live. Once you get up, like you look at Connecticut, you have a flat coastline and rivers going straight in. Not nearly as many people can live there. If you come to the coast where you've got a bay, an inlet, and another inlet, a salt marsh, all of those provide food. And from them you can go into the bay and out towards Block Island and the ocean and get all kinds of food out there. The seals, the swordfish, the cod, all of these things you can get. Now, if you have you can have the worst harvest in the world with the codfish, the seals, the swordfish, the deer, the bear, all of that. They're still going to be around. So from basically Narragansett territory up north to Gloucester area, you have the same kind all along the coast. You have this mesh of inland resources and coastal resources. In the back there.
You were able to go back to England a few times, and you also managed to survive the wars. How do you explain that?
Well, my first time back to England was actually at the very beginning of the English Civil War, which was Parliament against the King's forces. You remember I mentioned my mentor, Sir Edward Cook?
Yes.
That's parliamentary forces. Everyone knew me from going to Parliament, from writing down the speeches. So as I walked around, I know the right people in the right places. You're all here from Rhode Island. You know how Rhode Island politics works. London was the same size. It's everyone knew everyone. And everyone knew me as Cook's boy. So I was able to get audiences that no one else could because I knew the way the sausage was made, if you will. As far as getting the royal charter from King Charles, Charles came back to the throne in 1660, after the Commonwealth, where Oliver Cromwell and the parliamentary forces had beheaded Charles II's father, Charles I. Well, one of the first things that Charles II did when he came back to the throne was go after anybody that had anything to do with killing his father. Some of them fled to Massachusetts and Connecticut, good Puritan colonies. Charles, when he was in exile during the Commonwealth, had been in France and Italy. In Italy, he spent time with Galileo's daughter. He knew this new way of looking at the world called scientific investigation, where you test things. And that's why it's really important at the beginning of the charter that says we're going to try a lively experiment with this colony. It's a new way of looking at the world, a new way of testing things. It's under Charles II that Sir Isaac Newton was an undergrad. So Charles had this great thing that could have been headlines on newspapers saying, we're going to grant to the colony of Rhode Island a level of religious freedom unseen anywhere else before, which would make great headlines, and we're going to do it as an experiment, and that's all well and good. But if you've ever seen the way politics really works, that's not enough, is it? What's the worst thing you can do to hardcore Puritan colonies that are giving shelter to regicides, but put right in their midst a colony with complete religious freedom? The real politics of it. That he was able to get his revenge instead of sending troops or soldiers to arrest and harass these two colonies. He hits them philosophically. You know, I make friends fair easy because I'm straightforward and fair honest. Native people were my friends, and when I first got here, I made friends with Canonicus and Miantanomi of the Narragansett. I made friends with Osamequin of the Wampanoag. I made friends with all of these people, so they knew. Actually, they said at one point that when I write something down and give it to them, I'm the only Englishman whose written words say the same thing twice. So they trusted me. Yes, sir, in the back.
I came across your rock recently on Prudence Island.
Yes,
Preacher's Rock. What was that used for?
it's a landmark. It's a place where, if you look around, the rest of Prudence Island is fair flat. It's a good landmark. We'll say, well, when you're going to meet someone, we're going to meet over at that rock there, or out to New Taconic Hill, or the large rock in back of New Taconic Hill. You go by landmarks because there are no street signs or buildings or inns that you can go to the last Lion Inn and take a left. You go to the great rock that's out there. And that's what it was. It was a landmark. It also makes a wonderful place to talk from. Native peoples would use it as a talking rock where you could stand on it and have an audience in front of you, or you could stand in front of it and use it as a sounding board like they do in the houses of worship, where your voice racks off the back of the sound and goes forward. Yes?
Where did Rhode Island, the name, come from?
There was an explorer a long, long time ago, in the early, I think it was 1524, by the name of Giovanni da Verrazzano, sailed for the King of France. He was an Italian. He came along here and said one of the isles looked about the same size and shape as the Isle of Rhodes. Not done yet. There was a Dutch explorer in 1604 who came along and said one of the islands was red, and in Dutch, it's Rhode Island. Not done yet. A safe, sheltered anchorage for ships. Not quite a harbor, but a good, safe, sheltered anchorage is called a road, such as Hampton Roads down in the Chesapeake. So, the English love of puns. You have three for the same place. So that's where we get the Rhode Island. There.
King Philip's War, they burned down Deerfield, Massachusetts?
These places up in central Massachusetts, many different towns.
Because I always thought that war was just kind of a regional.
Oh, the war extended up into northern Massachusetts, which is Casco and going up towards the St. Lawrence River. The war extended all the way up there. And it lasted longer up there than it did down here. It turned the entire area, this all New England, into a turmoil to try and get rid of all the English.
One more question, ladies and gentlemen.
Over there.
Charter, how did you get people to join you in Providence?
Word traveled fast. I had a congregation, when I was in Massachusetts Bay, when I was at Salem, when I was at Plymouth, I had a congregation of people that liked what I was saying and did follow me. So when I left Salem, even though I was on the run, in the springtime, people came to follow me. And when we set up the town of Providence, there were 10 to 12 families that came to live with us there in Providence. And as word spread, more and more people came. As other towns were formed up, more and more people came. The Jews that came to Newport came from Brazil. Worldwide news, everywhere. It's one of the few places that people could come without being punished for what they believed. New York under the Dutch was similar, but it was restricted. Maryland, under the English down to the south in the Chesapeake, was fine as long as you were a Christian. The penalty for not being a Christian in Maryland was death. You see the difference? No person is punished for what they believe as a Christian, or die. That's the choices that people had. And people came here. Did that satisfy your question? Excellent. We have one more, we have two more in the back. Yeah, well, let's go with it. Go ahead.
How does Ann Hutchinson figuring in on this element?
Well, Massachusetts Bay got scared. There were powers going on back in England that wanted to take away their charter. And I myself was one of the reasons they acted on what I was saying was people were saying that they can't control their people. And so they tossed me out. And then Ann Hutchinson is doing things that is getting people upset. And they're saying, see, they can't control their people. And so Ann Hutchinson comes down to Portsmouth with her people. Basically, there were forces in the government in England that wanted to turn New England into a commercial rather than political social exercise. They wanted to extract resources with minimal amount of investment. And there were people that had the charter for Massachusetts Bay that wanted to create a beacon on a hill to tell people how they could fix England.
I believe she was killed.
She was killed in New Amsterdam, or just outside of New Amsterdam.
Yes.
As I was sailing to England for the first time, I could see the fires from that uprising,
Yes.
which means her house, and so I saw where she was dying. Yes.
Tragic. One last
One
question.
last one, right in the.
I just want to say, you're so revered in Rhode Island, we named the university after you.
I may, for a moment, break character. They named a used car salesman.
Elder Williams, would you have any final comments you would like to express to our attendees?
We worked hard. If you've ever been to England and seen the places where I was born, where I lived, you take a look at the banqueting house at Whitehall. Go and look at pictures of some of these places where I worked. Go to Parliament. See these places. I traded all of that. Go to Pembroke and go to Christ's College in Cambridge. Take a look at these places. We traded all of that to come here. Because here was an opportunity to start something brand new that nobody had done before. And we did it. It wasn't just a philosophical idea. It wasn't just philosophers debating air. We put it together. We got it to start. We started it working. But we're only a few people. If you see value in anything that we did, if you see value in any of the ideals that we expressed, if you see that it is part of your life that you can't do without, there's only one person, not me. I can no longer defend this. The foundation of civil power lies in the people. And unless you defend it, it will disappear because the greedy powers that be will take and take and take from you. They don't rest. And it'll be a dream dreamed, a bubble burst.
Are you talking just about Rhode Island?
Thank you very much.
As a final comment, in the quest for liberty and freedom, history proves once again one among us rises with courage and fortitude to meet the challenges of the time for the benefit of all. And we are very grateful.
Thank you very much.
To all our guests, thank you and good evening.